We continue now at the top of Daf Chavav Amud Aleph and Meseches Eruvin. This is Eruvin Daf 26a. The Gemara here was discussing the orchard of the Reish Galusa, and Rav Huna Bar Chinina had put up some kind of an enclosure because it was too large and it was not hukaf ladira. It was more than a beis asayim, and it was not hukaf ladira. And now the Gemara says, and the way Rashi explained it on the last Amud, there's going to be an alternative explanation towards the bottom of this Amud. But the way Rashi explained it in the last Amud is he basically built an area where a shomer, where some kind of guard could live, and that could make the area considered mukaf ladira. And then Rava came along and shalfinu. Rava removed this fence or this wall that was put up by Rav Huna Bar Chinina. Rashi says shalfinu to lo svira lehatakanta. He did not agree with this solution that Rav Huna Bar Chinina implemented. And then Azal Rav Papa Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yehoshua. Then Rav Papa and Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yehoshua, they came naktinhu mi basrei. Rashi says that means naktinhu mi basrei shelo yachzu Rav Huna v'yisaknim. They basically took them away. This materials that were used, they made it impossible for Rav Huna to go ahead and put it up again. So in other words, Rava, Rav Papa, and Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yehoshua all disagreed with this solution of Rav Huna Bar Chinina. Gemara says, Lamachar, the next day, Eisvei Ravina l'Rava. Ravina asked Rava the following question. Now, the way Rashi understands this here is Eisvei l'siyue d'shaper Ravid. This is not really a question on Rava. It actually is a support for Rava. Again, this is the first understanding of Rashi. This is going to be a support for Rava that what Rav Huna Bar Chinina did was not correct. It says in the Brisa as follows: Ir chadasha. Let's say you have a new city, modedin la miyeshivasa. Then you measure in terms of tchum. You measure from the area where people live. V'yeshana, if it's an older city, mechomasa, then you can measure it from the area where the wall is. And the Gemara says, Ezu hi chadasha. The Brisa says, what's considered a new city? Ve'ezu hi yeshana. What's considered an older city? Chadasha shehukfa ulevasof yashva. A new city is one that was first built. First you surrounded it with walls, and then people moved in. Yeshana, an old city, is yashva. It was first settled, ulevasof hukfa, and then you surrounded it with walls. So there's different rules in terms of where we measure the tchum from. Rashi here says, Ir chadasha modedin la miyeshivasa. In mukefes choma, let's say the city is surrounded by a wall, ve'ena miyusheves kula, but it's not completely settled. Kishabo limdo tchume, when you want to measure the tchum, lo yimdod la min achoma ela min habatim. Don't measure from the wall, you should measure from the houses. Techomaso lav chomahi l'shav yakula kadalat amos, because the wall is not considered really a real wall, that it should all be considered dalat amos. Hoel v'yeshivasa chadasha, since the settlement was new, shekidma chomasa liyeshivasa, meaning the wall was there before the settlement, so the wall doesn't really count. Avol yeshana sheyeshuva yeshana, but if it's been old, it's been settled for a long time, it's an older settlement, the kadam lechomasa, it preceded the wall, moded la mechomasa, then already you're allowed to measure from the wall. So that's the point of the Bryce over here, is to say that it depends if it was settled first or if the wall was put up first. So now Ravina says, V'hai nami kuhukfa ulevasof yashva dami. In our case as well, in the case of the orchard of the Reish Galusa, it's really a situation where it was surrounded first, and then you're putting in this shomer, then you're putting in this living area. Rashi says, V'hai nami hai pardes hare hukaf yomim ravim. It was surrounded a long time ago. V'hacha shomira nasa achshav. Now you're putting in the shomer later. You're putting in this hut for the guard to watch over it. You're putting it in after the fact. The hekif hapardes lava daita dachtira. The surrounding that you made, the wall that you made, wasn't originally with this intention that there should be this living quarters there. Have it wasn't with that intention. V'dami ki hukaf ulevasof yashav. So really, it should be comparable to a case where it was surrounded first and then settled. And just like in the case of tchum, when something is surrounded first and then settled, we don't pay attention to the wall. We don't measure from the wall. So the same thing should be true over here. The wall should be, it should not be considered hukaf ladir in this case, because it's the settled, so to speak, after the fact. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Papa le Rava. Now Rav Papa says to Rava, again, Rav Papa also was one of the Amoraim who agreed with Rava that this solution was no good. So again, Rashi says, Amar le Rav Papa le Rava l'siyue. Rav Papa here is supporting Rava that it's no good what Rav Huna Bar Chinina did. So he said to him as follows, V'amar Ravasi, didn't Ravasi say, Mechitzos adrachlin lo shma mechitza. Mechitzos adrachlin are not called a mechitza. Rashi says, adrachlin banoim sha'osim mechitza This is people who are builders, and they put up a wall for shade purposes. Just while they're building, it should be up there for that purpose. So now he concludes his support as follows. He says, Alma, we see from here, if it's made litzniusa, that's not called a mechitza. Here too, the solution of Rav Huna bar Chanina is no good, it's just litzniusa. Rashi says, meaning it was just to protect them, and then it's going to be destroyed the next day. Lav klumi, it's nothing. This was put up as a temporary hut in order to protect the shomer, Davida. That's what it was made for. It's not really a dira. So therefore, again, Rav Papa supports Rava and says it was good what you did. This solution that Rav Huna bar Chanina had is not a good solution. V'omer Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua l'Rava. Now Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua also says to Rava. Again, Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua was the other Amora who agreed with Rava. He says to him as follows: V'omer Rav Huna, didn't Rav Huna say mechitza ha'asuya l'nachas lo shma mechitza? A mechitza that's made l'nachas is not a good mechitza. And Rashi explains l'nachas shelo lodur sham el hishtamer mashi anichu sham. It's not really made to live there. It's just made to protect that which is placed there. Again, in this particular situation, he was placing some stuff within these walls. That's not going to be considered a good mechitza. Rabba bar Avua ma'ariv lo lekula mechuza arsiyasa, because Rabba bar Avua, he made an eruv for the entire city, but he did it in sections. He went through the whole city. Why? Mishum pira de beituri, because of the pira de beituri. Rashi explains, arsiyasa shchunos levad. So basically, what Rav Huna did was he said we have to make an eruv neighborhood by neighborhood. We can't do the entire city. Every neighborhood had a bunch of alleys. He did not allow them to make an eruv in the whole city at one shot. Even though it was a small city, that you didn't have 600,000 people in that city. Here, a small city, you can be ma'ariv the whole thing. The idea is, what's an Ir Shal Yachid? It's a city that's not large like the Diglei Midbar, like when they traveled in the Midbar, which was 600,000 people. And why did he say that? Mishum Pira de Beituri. There was like a deep pit between the various neighborhoods. And they used to put over there the various pits of the dates. Lechol hashvarim, the ox would eat from there. Va'ir ein lachom, and there was no wall. Umavos shel batei hashchunos mefulashim, and the alleyways were totally open. Va'asu mechitzas l'rashem avos l'chol tzad shechutz lir, and they put in walls at the ends, at kind of the ends of the cities. These are the walls. So here's a picture of the city. You had all these alleyways, and they put up a bunch of walls at the outskirts of each alleyway, l'chol tzad shechutz lir, to every side that was going out of the city. L'shtamer hagarinim, that was a way of protecting this food that they had for the animals. V'lo chashiv leim mechitza letzaref esam avos v'lasos ha'irachas, and this mechitza that they made wasn't able to unify the entire city. Even though it was really a full-fledged mechitza. In other words, the walls they put up were perfectly good walls, and maybe they should have been able to make an eruv in the whole city, but the fact of the matter is they were made only to protect the Pira de Beituri. So since they were made only for that purpose, therefore they're lihishtamir, basically, therefore they're not going to be considered good mechitzas. That's the point that he's making over here, and that's the same as the solution of Rav Huna bar Chanina. Again, Rabba bar Avua, because Rabba bar Avua ma'ariv lo lekula mechuza, he made this is a statement from Rav Huna, and it's being supported by the story of Rabba bar Avua. So Rabba bar Avua made an eruv for the entire area of mechuza arsiyasa. He did it by neighborhoods. He divided up by neighborhoods, mishum pira de beituri, because of the pira de beituri. V'pira de beituri kemechitza asui lanachas dami, and that's exactly this case. The pira de beituri is like a mechitza that's made just for protection purposes, and therefore you see it's not a good mechitza. So in the end of this whole story, Kari Alaya Reish Galusa Chachamim Heimo Lahara Ulhetev Lo Yadu. These Amoraim, they're real Chachamim to make everything bad. They all came along and said why the solution was no good, but they don't have any actual positive solution for me. Now Rashi here says Pira. First of all, the word Pira doesn't refer actually to the fruits, the Garinei Tamarim, the pits of the dates that were inside the ditch. Rather, the word Pira, Rashi here says, is Shocha, actually refers to the ditch itself. Kimo Pira de Kvari Meseches Tainus. We find this term in Meseches Tainus. V'ach Mechitza de Rav Huna Kasuy Lenachas The point of this question is that the mechitza of Rav Huna also is like a mechitza asui l'nachas. She'ena nasas l'dira tamid latzes v'lavava. It wasn't made to really live there all the time to come and go. It was made basically a temporary thing just for protection purposes. And then he said, the Reish Galusa said, lahara less, or you guys are very good at making at answering things, but you don't have any heter for me. Now that is all the first explanation of Rashi. We're going to read through the second explanation of Rashi here. Uvitshuvas hagaonim mitzasiya b'lashon acher. He says, I found another in the Tshuvas Gaonim. I found another pshat in this whole Gemara. V'yashar be'enai ma'od, and I believe it to be correct. Hahu bustana karfif yoser bebeis asayim shalahukaf ladira have. That's the same. This bustana, this orchard was a karfif. It was more than a beis asayim. It was not hukaf ladira. V'avarnika kimin achsadra o kuba shebonin hamalachim besocha pardis shalahen v'yomed be'emsa pardis. The avarnika, that's like some area, patio, some kind of area where they basically hang out inside in the middle of the pardis. V'lo hutzrach reish galusa ela lataltal mi pesach bustana shaya etzel habayis ad avarnika. And the reish galusa only needed to move things from the entry of the orchard, which was by his house, to the avarnika. That's all he wanted to do. He just wanted to use a small area. He didn't want to use the entire area. Rav Huna bar Chinna kamin shvil min ha-pesach ad avarnika. So basically, Rav Huna bar Chinna in this pshat, he made a path that went from the door of the house to the avarnika, to the achsadra area, to this kind of patio area surrounded by a few walls. Geder mikan v'geder mikan, and the way he made this path was he made a wall on each side, bekana kana pachos migimel, and it was with a wall of reeds, all less than 3 tefachim away from each other. So you had this path to this avarnika, this achsadra area, this patio area where he was going to, which he was going to use over Shabbos. Lahafsik ben aderech lebustan. And what that would do is this wall that he's making, this halachic wall, would separate between the path and the rest of the orchard. V'yataltel ba'oso shvil. That way he can move things, he can carry things on the path. So according to this pshat, he's not trying to render the entire orchard mukaf ladira. That was not what the original solution was of Rav Huna bar Chinna. He was just trying to separate the path from the rest of the orchard to allow you to carry on the path. V'rava kishalfinu lo lesor el lahakil olav. And the truth is, according to this pshat, according to the Tshuvas HaGaonim, Rava was actually not trying to be strict. Rava was trying to be even more lenient, and he said, I think you can remove these. I think you can remove these poles, these reeds, because you don't need them at all. The svirale, the shari latatule bekula bustana. He said you can carry in the entire orchard. The kevan de banale avarnika bevustana, because since this patio, this achsadra area is built by the bustana. Again, the achsadra really isn't. It's like an area which is surrounded by some walls, maybe not fully surrounded on all 4 sides, but it's got some walls. It's an area where the Reish Galusa wanted to use that area. So since you had this avarnika there, shavia lakula bustana chatzar lavarnika, what ends up happening is the entire orchard becomes a chatzar for this achsadra area. V'have mukaf ladira, and it really was mukaf ladira the whole time. So really, what Rava was doing was saying it's not necessary to wall off this area. The entire thing is mukaf ladira. V'yasu talmidei de Rava Rav Papa v'Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua naktinu to lo lahader Rav Huna bar Chinna v'liskininu. And then comes along the students of Rava, who are Rav Papa and Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua, and they say, yeah, forget it. We're going to take away these things entirely. We don't want Rav Huna bar Chinna to put them back up because they're not necessary. And at that time they didn't realize that what Rava did was inappropriate. In other words, Rav Papa and Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yeshua agreed with Rava. They didn't realize yet that what he did was wrong. Now the next day, Rav Papa and Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yeshua come along and they say, wait a minute, we think we made a mistake. We think that Rav Huna bar Chinna was correct. Really, he did need these walls. The next day, Ravina asked Rava the following question, Ir Chadasha, and these are all questions again. So in other words, originally they agreed with Rava and they said, oh, you're right, you could be very lenient. And then they said, wait a minute, you're not allowed to be very lenient. This is not mukaf ladira. They said this bustana should be like it was surrounded first and then settled. The avarnika was only built after they had already had this tree was growing and everything saviv around it. Therefore, Rav Huna bar Chinna was correct. You do need a wall off the path. It's not considered mukaf l'dira. For Rav Papa also even mechitzas adrachlin, and Rav Papa similarly he asked the question for mechitzas adrachlin. Da mechitzas davarnika nami l'tznius avida. It was just made for tznius purposes, for privacy purposes. V'chein lenachas l'shtamish laniach batzit l'soseyen u'levushein. And it was also made lenachas, meaning they're just putting their taluses there, their garments there, shaposhtem sham ushar klei tashmisham. So in other words, they realized that really it's not really considered mukaf l'dira. So kari Allah Abaye al Rav Papa v'Rav Huna B'Reid Rav Yoshua. Now, according to this pshat, the Reish Galusa is referring to Rav Papa and Rav Huna B'Reid Rav Yoshua when he has this insult. Shalom nizkru esmo, because yesterday they didn't remember all these halachas. V'sasru tikuna shal Rav Huna Bar Chinna. They agreed with Rav and they destroyed the solution of Rav Huna Bar Chinna. V'achshav nasu chachamim lesor olav. Now suddenly they're such chachamim, they know how to prohibit everything. Ulheitev lo yadu esmo, but yesterday they didn't know how to do the positive thing. V'chein Ikri says this is the Ikra pshat. So again, according to two pshatim over here, exactly what they're doing. But in either case, Rav Papa and Rav Huna B'Reid Rav Yoshua are coming along and saying it's not hukaf ladira. The question is, are they saying it's not hukaf ladira, meaning the solution of Rav Huna Bar Chinna is no good, or are they saying it's not hukaf ladira and therefore we really needed the solution of Rav Huna Bar Chinna? Those are the two explanations in Rashi. We continue now the two dots. Am Rabbi Loi shamati mi Rabbi Elazar v'afilu beis course. Rabbi Loi said in the Mishnah that I heard from Rabbi Eliezer that it can be a much larger area, even if it's not hukaf ladira, it's fine. It can even be an area of a base core. Gemara says, Masnisan delo kechananya. Our Mishnah here, meaning Rabbi Loi, quoting Rabbi Eliezer, is not like Chananya. The Tanya, because we learned in a Braisa, Chananya Omer, Chananya says, Va'afilu hi arboim sa, ki istiratia shel melech. Not only can it be a base core is 30 sa, Chananya says it could even be 40 sa, even larger than a base core, like the surrounded area that a king makes. Amar Rabbi Yochanan u'shneim mikra echad darshu. Rabbi Yochanan said they're really both darshaning the same pasuk. They're actually learning from Chizkiah, who was a king. They're learning the size. Shenemar, because it says in the pasuk, Vayhi Yeshayahu lo yatsa el chatzar hatichona ksiv ha'ir v'karinon chatzar. It refers to the area, the courtyard of Chizkiah as a city, and it also refers to as a chatzar. Mikan listeratia shel melech shahayu kayaros beinonios. You see that the courtyard of the king was almost the size of a medium-sized city. And b'maikom ifilgi, what is Chananya and Rabbi Loi arguing about? Mar savar hayoros beinonios have in base core. One opinion is the size of these medium-sized cities are a base core, meaning 30 saw. Umar savar mem saw havin, and the other opinion says it's 40 saw. Rashi here explains, Ki istratia shel melachim rechava sha'achore platin. What this is referring to is the yard that's behind the palace, the backyard of a palace. V'sham hayu mitaylim tamid al me'ika dir bachi. They used to live there all the time. You see that it's possible to have a dira in such a situation, and therefore that becomes the size of the limit. When you have an area that's mukaf shalola dira, the limit is either a base core or 40 sa. Ushnei and Rabbi Loi v'Chananya. Both Rabbi Loi and Chananya are learning from this pasuk hatichona acharei palton shel Chizkiah. What it means is it's behind the palace of Chizkiah. Di chatzer shelifnei batim have hachitzona have karila. The one in front would be called chitzona. Tichona means it's behind. It's like a backyard. V'haf agav de gedoli hikeir karila chatzer. Even though it's very large like a city, it was called a chatzer v'lo huk v'ladira, and it was not mukaf ladira. So now the Gemara continues just on this story over here of Yeshayahu. The Yeshayahu, my boy Hassam, what was Yeshayahu doing over there? Amar Rava bar bar Chana, Rabbi Yochanan, Rava bar bar Chana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Melamed Shechala Chizkiah. What it's teaching us is that Chizkiah was sick. That's what's happening in the story over there in the Navi. V'halach Yeshayahu v'hoshev yeshiva al pischo. And what he's doing there in the Chatzar is he made a yeshiva. He established a yeshiva at the entrance of the palace. Mikan l'talmid chacham shechal. And from here you see that when a talmid chacham gets sick, Shemoshiv and yeshiva al pischo, we put a yeshiva by his doorway. But the Gemara then says Vlad Milsi, it's not true. We don't put a yeshiva by his doorway. Dil ma'asi legruye beisatan. That actually might incite the satan further when you put a yeshiva there. So first Rashi says, first of all, my boy Asim berachava shachore paltin. What is he doing over there in this rachava she'ena l'derech yitzia? That's not a way out of the palace. He's going to a court. He's going to the backyard where you can't get out. Why would he go that way? So the Gemara answered, lahoshev yeshiva shel talmidim lasuk b'torah al pischo shelo yeh rishus l'malach hamavis likanis sham. When you put the talmidim there learning Torah, the malach hamavis can't enter. But then it says satan malach hamavis techichazi deminsa v'adi adadi migrabu. On the contrary, when the satan sees all these talmidim, it's gonna incite him to fight more, and it's gonna cause more problems. So the Gemara says lab milsi, therefore you really don't do this. The Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting the Mishnah of V'chein shamati heimenu anshe chatzer sheshakach echad v'lo irev beiso aser. Again, this is Rabbi Loi quoting Rabbi Eliezer. I heard that if you have a bunch of people in the chatzer and one of them didn't make an erev, so it's going to be aser for him. Rashi here will explain everything that's what's going on. Anshe chotzer sheshogach echad mehen. Vadem asisen b'shabitel len rishus. First of all, Rashi says the Mishnah is talking about where one of the people in the chotzer forgot to join the Eruv. So as a solution, he was mevatel his rishus in the chotzer. He said, "I'm giving up my ownership stake for Shabbos so that I don't aser." Shahayalo b'chotzer, whatever rishus he had in the chotzer, he's being mevatel. Ma'iri, that's for sure what it's talking about. De'ilo batel af b'chotzer asur mataltel mibotein. Because if he wasn't mevatel his rishus, then nobody could carry into the chotzer, even from their houses. Shabbatim l'chol echad v'echad hein, because each person has a sole ownership of his house. V'achotzer rishus kulon, and the chotzer belongs to everybody. V'chelko osir alein, and his portion, since he didn't join the Eruv, because he also has a rishus in the chotzer, is going to aser on them. So for sure the case is where he was mevatel his rishus. Now, what's Rabbi Loi saying? He's teaching us as follows: that if somebody says he's giving up his stake in the chotzer, rishus beiso nami bittel, he's also giving up his stake in his own house automatically. He doesn't even need to say it. V'nasa oreach etzlan, and he becomes like a guest, like he doesn't really own anything in this chotzer or his house at all. He's like a guest, and therefore he doesn't aser. Lefikach af beiso mutter lahen. Therefore his house, even his house, is mutter for everybody else in the chotzer because he was mevatel to them. Aval hu aser lahachnas ulahotzi. But he himself cannot carry things back and forth from his house to the chotzer. Even though he can carry things from their house. Like anybody else who's a guest can carry things in and out of the other person's house. Because it belongs to one person. He can't take from his own house. And we don't say that his house is like the same as their houses. It's not. From their houses he can carry because he's just like a regular person. He's like a guest. But if he starts carrying things from his house to the chotzer, that's like he's being machzik once again in his own house, like he's taking over the rights of his house. That's already a problem. That would then aser against them. Everything would become aser again. He would actually aser on everybody else if he does that. So again, according to Rabbi Eloi, quoting Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah, he's not allowed to use his house and carry things back and forth, but all the other houses in the chotzer are okay, and everybody else can do what they want. And so now the Gemara asks, but didn't we learn another Mishnah? Beiso asur lahotzi ulahachnes lo vilohen. It said that his house is a problem to carry things back and forth, not only for him, but for them as well, which is against what Rabbi Eliezer says. And Rashi here explains, V'atanan l'kamon beperak hador, beiso asur lahachnes ulahotzi lo vilohen. It's a problem for everybody. His house is a problem for them. But the chotzer is still fine. They can take from their houses to the chotzer, even though he's got rishus over it. And the Gemara explains what's the case. Now, if he wasn't mevatel his chotzer, it certainly wouldn't be permitted. It would be a problem. The case over here is specifically where he's mevatel his rishus in the chotzer, but he was not mevatel his rishus in his house. And according to this Mishnah, when somebody gives up his rishus in the chotzer, he's not giving up his rishus in his house automatically. It doesn't follow. Lafika chotzer kula shelaheni. Therefore, the chotzer belongs to them entirely. But his house is still a problem, and no one can carry from the chotzer to his house. That's what this other Mishnah is saying. So there's basically a discrepancy according to our Mishnah. When he's mevatel his rishus in the chotzer, he's also automatically mevatel his rishus in the house, and the house becomes permitted to everybody else. To him, it's a problem, but to everybody else, the chotzer is going to be okay, and his house will also be okay. But the other Mishnah is saying, no, when he's mevatel his rishus in the chotzer, that's all he's mevatel, and he still maintains his rishus in his house, and his house is a problem for everyone. Amar Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yoshua Rav Sheshes, and Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yeshua says in the name of Rav Sheshes, Lo Kasha, it's not difficult, and the Gemara will continue to explain along the lines of what I've just explained. We'll see that in the next video on Daf Chavav Amud Beis.